It's time for another day of Bible study, and so glad that you've taken time to be with us today as we are journeying through the book of Mark. Today, we have made it finally into chapter 6. I told you this was going to go fast, this was going to be easy, and I hope that you're joining us along for this journey. If you are, I'm certain that you are already feeling the presence of the Spirit of God and the change that's going on inside of you. Don't give up. Even if you're not able to read and you're only joining us by Bible study whenever you can, here live on Facebook or catching it in the archive, that's great, whatever you're able to do. But if you can do more, you can always download this link to PDF that is attached to this post, and you can join us on the journey of reading. Now, there is absolutely no reason for you to begin way up here at the beginning and try to catch up with us, though 5 chapters isn't necessarily that much. One a day, you'd be there with us by the end of the week. Or you could probably, if you have a couple of hours, read through the entire thing, maybe in less than an hour. But either way, if you want to join us and you've not already begun, feel free to just start where we are. You haven't really missed anything. All of the great parts are still yet to come. One more thing, if you've not done this, go visit our website, our new website over at christtable.today. Find out a little bit more about what I'm doing, what our family is doing, the ministry that we're starting, not just here in South Florida, but across the U.S. It's going to give you a great insight into where we're going, though there is so much more information that we've not put out there yet, just because it's happening so quickly. I just cannot keep with communicating it. And so rather than overwhelm, just kind of dropping those little pieces of information out there as we go. But I'll keep you updated here on all of those things, and especially on Sunday mornings. If you were with us yesterday, what a great thing that we experienced yesterday morning, seeing people log on here live. Good morning, Loretta, Deborah, Barbara, Joe, and everybody else who's watching who hasn't checked in. It's good to have you here. Yesterday's passage kind of lit a fire under me with Jairus' daughter, and we have the final second part of that story in today's reading. And I thought about going there and talking about that. It's a great passage. Maybe at some point I'll go back and cover it in a morning Bible study. But because I talked about it a little bit yesterday in the Sunday morning worship service, I thought that maybe I'd handle the second half of today's passage. And I'm always, kind of looking for the places and the moments in the Bible that don't get a lot of coverage in sermons or in writings and books and things. And so I tend to be drawn towards those places whenever I'm doing a Bible study or a sermon. And today is one of those places in particular as we come to Mark chapters 5 and 6. We're actually going to come and jump right to chapter 6 and those 6 verses there today. And you're probably going to notice a colloquialism that we use in English that you may or may not have known actually comes from Scripture. And this is a great passage. I think you're going to see a lot of resonance in yourself and maybe in your own journey in this passage. And if you've already read it, then you've already blown my cover. But why don't we just go ahead and jump into Mark chapter 6, verse 1. So it says that Jesus left that part of the country and returned with his disciples to Nazareth, his hometown. And so Jesus is in Capernaum, which is the town where he is living. Nazareth is over the mountain. You've got to kind of climb out of the basin that the Sea of Galilee sits in. And so it probably would have been a day's journey or a couple of days' journey to get to Nazareth, depending on if Jesus stopped along the way or was way late. It could have been more than a couple of days. But Jesus essentially leaves his home base territory around the Sea of Galilee, focused in Capernaum. Most of the stories that we've experienced so far have taken place certainly around the Sea of Galilee, but definitely in Capernaum, to go back to the place where he was raised. Many of us have had that feeling of returning home. Now, if you've not really ever left from home, then maybe that feeling feels a bit different in some way. But most of us have experienced moving away from home, either for college or for a job or for a relationship, and returning back home. And those feelings of going back home, oftentimes, especially the older that you get, are a mixed bag. The word bittersweet comes to mind, that some of those memories, perhaps of home, are memories that are difficult, that you wish weren't there, but time maybe has healed some of those wounds, and so you're still able to go back home. Maybe sometimes it's difficult, or you try to avoid as much as possible going back home because of those. And oftentimes they're mixed with good memories as well, things that were positives, people that you'd like to see, or places that you'd like to see if the people are no longer there, if they've passed on or left. And so it can be a positive and a negative thing all at the same time going home. And we're going to find that perhaps that's what it was for Jesus as well. But he has an entourage. He's not alone. And whenever you're heading home, it's always good to be taking people with you. I find that whenever I go home, it's nice to have my wife and my kids there, because it takes some of the attention off of me and helps distract me sometimes from the emotions of being back home. I get to share my joys and my experiences and the places that I loved from home with them, which is enjoyable. And if there are rocky moments, then they end up becoming a bit of a shield where I can focus on them. So Jesus shows up in his hometown. And the next Sabbath, he begins teaching in the synagogue, and many who heard him were amazed. Now, a couple of things going on here. It would not have been unusual for Jesus to be teaching in any synagogue, let alone his home synagogue. Synagogue was a central place of worship and community for Judaism. In each of the local towns, there would have been a synagogue of some sort. And Nazareth would have been no different. Jesus, certainly as a rabbi and as a teacher, would have not only been allowed to teach and speak in the synagogue, but there would have been some level of expectation as a rabbi that he would have done so, and probably some level of expectation that he do so simply because he's the hometown boy. Oftentimes I can remember going home and preaching in my home church, and though my mom might disagree with me, none of those sermons were good, but there's a feeling of love and of joy of somebody who has gone out and done something and learned, been educated, and is fulfilling their call, coming home and fulfilling that in front of the people who were a part of creating who you are and being a part of your life experience growing up is something wonderful, something healing, is something exciting. And so there would have been an expectation that Jesus would have done this in his hometown synagogue on the Sabbath, on the Friday. And so I brought this picture whenever we visited Nazareth a couple of years ago in Israel. We went to a synagogue in Nazareth that would have been like the one perhaps that would have been in a city the size of Nazareth in those days. And so this is not original to the time of Jesus. This has been built more recently in order to reflect our best understanding of what the synagogue in Nazareth would have been like. I see my mom here, always so sweet, is saying you always did a phenomenal job when you spoke. I know moms have to say that, but that's very kind of you, Mom. And I'm sure that Jesus did a phenomenal job whenever he spoke in his home synagogue as well. Now, I'm standing, when I snap this picture, literally in the doorway. And so this room is extremely small, but you can see around the edge of the room on three sides, there's this U-shaped bleacher seating pattern where there are three risers there that you can sit on. And it probably would have held, I don't know, comfortably 100 or 200 people, which would be about right because our understanding of Nazareth in those days when Jesus would have been there was that it was probably around 200 people or so. Very, very small city. And we know from the biblical record that it was Mary's family who lived there. And so most of them would have been related to Jesus through his mom's side of the family. So he would have not just been the hometown boy, but he would have been the family boy as well. Now, the other thing that we know is that there wouldn't have been probably an ordained person who would have been fulfilling the call in the synagogue here necessarily. And so traveling rabbis and speakers would have come through and would have had an opportunity to speak here. Also, so would people in the town and in the family would have had the opportunity to get up and speak. And so it would have been, in some sense, around Robin. Multiple people may have spoken here, would have had the opportunity to speak during the Sabbath experience. And Jesus on this day is one of them. And as Jesus is prone to do, he definitely speaks with that authority of God and speaks differently with a different level of authority and understanding and power than anyone else. And so the people, they knew him since the time he was running up and down the hillside around the synagogue and around their houses. And they asked, where did he get all this wisdom and the power to perform such miracles? They know this kid, they know this guy, which means that they understand him or think that they understand him or know him on a different level. And they scoffed at him, which oftentimes happens whenever somebody who is a local gets the big head. You know, you move away, you get an education, you come home and you think you know everything. Hometown people don't take kindly to that. Family members don't necessarily take kindly to that. There could be a level of pride in the person, but usually what happens is the self-pride gets impinged upon and jealousy begins to rise up, and they say, well, just because you know a bit more, have done a bit more, have brought a few more people back from the dead, whatever, we're still not believing that one, Jesus, doesn't mean you're better than I am. You're from Nazareth. I know who you are. I know where you came from. Don't you try to act all high and mighty on me. And this is the thing that happened back then, and it's still the thing oftentimes that happens today. So they scoff at him. He's just a carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon. And here his sisters live right among us. And so the rest of the family were still townies. They still lived in that small little armpit of a place called Nazareth. Now, we see a couple of things here. First of all, in that verse, we see that Joseph Sr., because there's a Joseph Jr. right here, isn't mentioned. Now, we could, and most rightly should, take that to mean that Joseph Sr. is no longer in the picture. It's likely that Joseph's dad has passed by this point, because by the time Jesus gets past the age of 12, we have reference to him in relation to that and them forgetting Jesus at the temple when they went for the Passover festivities at the age of 12 with Jesus. We don't have any reference to Joseph after that at all in Jesus' adult life. And so the assumption is that Joseph had passed at some point between Jesus being the age of 12 and 30. And so this is kind of one place where we take confirmation of that, because they don't reference him as Joseph's son. The other thing that we notice here, though, is that they don't reference him as Joseph's son. Everywhere else in Scripture, it's always the son of. Whenever you're being referenced in a familial way or in a genealogical way, it's always this person, the son of this person. And so, legally, your status and your standing and who you are comes through your father's line, because it was a patriarchal system. And so the fact that they're referencing Mary as being the parent here could and most likely does mean that Joseph is not on the scene. But this is also a backhanded compliment to Jesus. They're making fun of him here in this. There's just no other way around it, in that this is a sarcastic comment that's meant for harm and certainly meant for humor, because even if Joseph had passed by this point, and he likely has, but even if he's passed by this point, he would still be known as Jesus, the son of Joseph. And so by saying he's just a carpenter, the son of Mary and the brother of James, Joseph, Judas, and Simon, and his sisters live right here among us, this is how they're scoffing at him. This is another way for them to simply make fun of Jesus. You're just a carpenter. You're not a rabbi. You're not a healer. You're not a big name person. You're just a tradesperson. And carpenter could mean someone who worked with wood, but it really just meant an artist of some sort who built things with their hands. He could have laid tile. Could have worked with cement. It could mean any of these things. But they're making fun of him. You're just a tradesman. You're just a member of a union. You work in a factory. Who the heck do you think you are, son of Mary? Almost maybe implying that he wasn't even a good carpenter, because he doesn't get to rise to the level of being the son or the apprentice of a tradesman like Joseph. And we know your brothers and your sisters. They live right here among us. And so don't act as though you're all high and mighty, Jesus. And so they were deeply offended and refused to believe in him. Then Jesus told them, and here's the line. I love this line, and I've certainly pontificated for way too long here in this Bible study. So if you've lasted this long, may God bless you. A prophet is honored everywhere except in his hometown and among his relatives and his own family. And what I love about Jesus is Jesus has the ability to be direct and at times sarcastic and insightful and truthful, and say things that are just kind of a punch in the gut, but are truthful. And prophet is honored everywhere except in his hometown and among his relatives and his own family. Many of you have felt that way, where you're an expert everywhere except where you live. In your family, you're not an expert. In your workplace, you're not an expert. You go anywhere and be a consultant or to be thought highly of for who you are or what you've accomplished or what you've learned, except for where you are. Jesus felt this as well. But this is both interesting and excruciatingly sad. And with this, we'll finish. Because of their unbelief, he couldn't do any miracles among them except to place his hands on a few sick people and heal them. And he was amazed at their unbelief. This is a tragic end to what should have been a celebration. The boy who not only has made something of himself and put Nazareth on the map, has come home, and the boy who not only has put Nazareth on the map has come home, but the boy who is the fulfillment of what generations of our family have been praying and hoping for in the Messiah, is somebody whom we have known. It's not where they were. It's not where most people were, but you would think that the family, the people who were closest, would have been the people who would have seen it first because they'd seen Jesus from those early years. But you can be this close to something and still not see it. In fact, sometimes being this close to truth prevents you from seeing the truth. And that's exactly what happened with those who were in Nazareth. And tragically, because of their unbelief, it restricted God's ability, because healing comes through faith, comes through the faith of the individual. Jesus' ability to heal, God's not ever going to force you to do something you don't want to do, even if it's be healed from what's destroying you, whether that's literally, physically, or emotionally, mentally, spiritually, relationally. some of us are praying and hoping for healing, and when Jesus shows up to do it, because of our unbelief or our unwillingness, God's hands are tied. And this statement in verse 6, he was amazed at their unbelief. It feels a little like a throwaway line until you remember all of the reading that we've done in the last 5 chapters. Think of all of the people and their unbelief that we've encountered, and the religious leaders and the people in the synagogues, even the passages that I haven't talked through, but that we've read through in Mark. We have seen a tremendous amount of not only just unbelief, but hostility, outright hostility against Jesus, outright hostility against God, to the point of plotting his death, trying to take him out, trying to incarcerate him, trying to woo the people against him. An incredible level of unbelief, the likes of which is not just shocking, but is stunning. And yet, here in his hometown, this is his family and his extended family. After having seen everything that he had seen out of the religious leaders, from headquarters to home office back in Jerusalem, out of having seen all of this, he's amazed at the level of unbelief that comes from these individuals. People who he knows intimately and has known intimately, and people who know him and have known him intimately. Some of these people will get to a point of unbelief. Many of these people won't. Many of us and people around us, even with truth right in front of us, will get to a place of belief, though we may miss our moment of healing whenever it's there and offered. But many won't. Even when the truth is right in front of our faces. Why is that? Pride. Jealousy. Stand in the way. With this, let's close. If you're being rejected by people, Jesus was, you're probably on the right path. Press on. It can be very difficult when those people who are rejecting you are people who have been strong influences in your life over the years. Family, extended family, neighbors, people whom you love and whom have loved you, begin, because of your journey with Jesus and where he's taking you, begin to reject you. Boy, I've experienced a lot of that over the years. Still do. Pride. Jealousy. They go hand in hand with rejection. You see, rejection in the kingdom of God and in the economy of God is never really about you and what you're doing or shouldn't have done. It really is all about the other person and what they're feeling and what they don't want to do and where they're not willing to go with God. You're going to be rejected. You're going to be rejected for your beliefs. You're going to be rejected for your actions. You're going to be rejected by people who should know better. You're going to be rejected by people who gang up and get other people on their side. You're going to be rejected by people whom you respected and loved, and whom at one point respected and loved you. But at the end of the day, they have chosen the love for themselves and the respect for themselves and their own pride over truth. It's a fatal flaw. So if you're being rejected, you are likely headed on the right path. Don't give up. Press on. ChristTable.today. Sign up for our email list there. Give to the work that God's doing here. Learn a little bit more about how you can be a part. It's been great to have you here for Bible study today. Looking forward to being with you back again tomorrow when we're back in the book of Mark. But until that time, happy reading.